Well, we've talked a lot about today. One of the things weaving its way through the conversation is distribution, this age of distribution that we are in. At the turn of this year, Dorth Raffaelli became general manager of Bleacher Report, after overseeing programming and analytics and quality control, all of these things that are the important values that drive our medium. He's now taken on broad responsibility for the business, and today he's going to talk about the focus of the moment, working with distribution, all the distribution that's out there, Facebook, Snapchat, et cetera, Apple as we see it, without losing brand control, how Bleacher Report is looking at that environment and managing its way into it. So come on up. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you very much to have me. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic and just Bleacher Report in general. I think one of the things looking at what I was asked to present on, how to build and monetize social audience without becoming dangerously dependent on that platform. When you think of it, there's really three things going on there. So there's a lot. I want to sort of unpack that topic. Really hard to build a audience, a social media audience, and it's even harder then to monetize it. And if you're able to execute on those first two things, it's going to be likely that you will become dependent on it. So there's a lot going on there that I'll get into. So quickly, the agenda that I'm going to run you through, sort of an introduction to Bleacher Report, some background. I'm talking about our growth story. We've been around for about 7-8 years. I'm talking about native content and how in the social world, it started native, it went away, and now it's coming back. Diversification of the need to not put all your eggs in the same basket. And then social content. We're all publishers, I think mostly in this room here, and we talk about the business model a lot, we talk about funnels and how to get people into products, but it really is about content and the best content, and the previous presentations here really did touch upon it's such a crowded space that it's a return to quality content. So I think that's a really good thing for everyone, and that the people who are creating not quality content will be drowned out. And then at the end, we'll have some Q&A. So a little bit about Bleacher Report. We're a top-tier destination for sports, news, and entertainment. So, like any sports site, we do your power rankings, we do your preview, recap, we do all that sort of commodity sports information that people need to know about. But where we see Bleacher Report really different than some of the other players in that sports world is around the entertainment. We are tremendously young. Our key demo, it says here 18 to 24, but we really think of it as 16 to 24. You could even go down and say the minute someone gets a smartphone from their parents, whether, I have two girls, 4 and 8, and they're asking every day for one, and I'm trying to decide what's the age I'm going to give them one. Whatever that age is, that's when we want them to become a Bleacher Report user and use Bleacher Report to consume to find all their sports content. So we're tremendously mobile. I think Anderson's speech was amazing. I'm still trying to put my sort of head back together after all that information, and pretty much everything he says does align with the Bleacher Report business as well. We're 80% mobile. That's an average, right? So on a weekend during an event, we'll see our metrics even go up to 90 to 95%. So whether someone is going to school, going to work, on the bus, at home in front of the TV watching a game, we really want to create that mobile experience that satisfies them as a sports fan. So it could be a 5-minute snackable piece of content, it could be a 16-second video on Vine, it could be anything. It could be a 20-minute read on some special project. It could be anything, but it's really, we think of ourselves as mobile first. We build everything from a product perspective, thinking mobile first, and then we port that over to desktop. So highly mobile, and we're everywhere. So we're a 24/7 news organization, worldwide coverage. Our headquarters are in San Francisco. We have a large office in New York for our video production, and then we also have a London office that really leads our expansion and international sports. So when I talked about us being, we really see ourselves as the #1 sports brand on social media. And how we define that is interactions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this later. It's not necessarily the size of your followers, but how engaged they are. So I'll cover this a bit more later. From a sort of traditional metrics perspective, we think about Google Analytics, or we think about ComScore, we're #2 behind ESPN. But we really, when we're talking about that the future of sports, and especially that key demo, we really see ourselves as #1. So this, as I mentioned, we've been around for 7, 8 years. Like any startup, you have to grow, you have to show growth. And so this is a line of visits to Bleacher Report over time. And so this is not the full history of Bleacher Report, this is just the last 5 years. And you can see there are these step functions, right? So there's a peak, and then there's another peak, and those peaks really represent exponential growth. So when we look at, when we look at where that growth came from, I think one of the reasons why Bleacher Report's been able to be successful is we've had a lot of different funnels, a lot of different sources of traffic. So it started out with a newsletter program in 2010. Now everyone does a newsletter program, but we were one of the first to do a newsletter program where if you're a New York Jets fan, you were going to get the 10 stories that you need to know about your team. And it wasn't just Bleacher Report content. That was something core for Bleacher Report from the very beginning. We were source agnostic, right? So of those 10 stories, maybe only 2 or 3 would be Bleacher Report. Such a key part of Bleacher Report's DNA and history was that our founders, they weren't journalism majors, they weren't communication majors, they were history, math, philosophy, and economics, but they were sports fans. And so they built a company completely focused on user experience. And because of that, they always wanted to, we were pretty much the first site and first sports media company that was source agnostic. And we, right now, to this day, we send about 60 to 70 million referrals to other publishers. These could be partners, but these could be competitors and everyone in between. Where we saw an opportunity, it was such a crowded space, we wanted to make it easier to be a sports fan. So how do you make it easier to be a sports fan versus having someone go to 5 different publishers? We just wanted them to come to Bleacher Report first. So that was newsletters, then search. I think all of you guys probably figured how to optimize your articles, how to create content just for search, or better yet, optimize the content you're creating anyway for search. So that was our next sort of exponential growth. After that was our TeamStream app. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with our TeamStream app, but 5-star app does really well. It's the same curation model. And that was our next exponential growth. And then after that became social in 2013. So I want to kind of dig into social a little bit here. Originally, when we tackled social, it was a brand building exercise. So for that first, from 2010 to 2013, end of 2013, we weren't driving any traffic to Bleacher Report. It was just about building our brand, building our loyalty with users. We put a lot of stuff up natively. We linked to other people that were creating great content. And to be honest, during that period, I would say Bleacher Report wasn't really creating social content, right? We hadn't really entered that space yet. So as a result, we just didn't want to create a bad user experience. So we weren't sending traffic back to Bleacher Report. So then as TeamStream, as that exponential growth for our app sort of started to slow, and that exponential growth became linear growth, so all those products are still growing. They're just not growing exponentially like they started out doing. As TeamStream became linear growth, we really figured out we needed to figure out how do we get traffic from Bleacher Report. And so we started, instead of just linking out, we started to put Bleacher Report content in Facebook and Twitter, and we saw tremendous growth. Now, we were a little bit lucky because right at this moment that we made this decision, Facebook also made a decision to become really publisher-friendly. And I'm sure all of you are very familiar with that 2013 to the end of 2014 period, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It was a great time to be on Facebook from a publisher perspective, but it became dangerous too. Media companies were being created just on the ability to get traffic from Facebook. And we'll talk about, when I talk about why it's so important to diversify your traffic sources and your business. We'll talk about that as well. So when we talk, I was mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily the size of your social media following, but how engaged they are. So I'm going to do a quick comparison here between Bleacher Report and ESPN. I'm picking ESPN because they're sort of, they're number one and we're number two, and we definitely compare ourselves to them quite a bit. On Facebook, they have 3.8 times more followers than we do. So they have 14 million, we have 3.6. So they have 3.8 times more followers than us. But from an engagement perspective, we're 4.3 more engaging. So when you look at total interactions, and when I mean interactions, I mean likes, shares, comments, and clicks back to content. When you look at total interactions, we actually perform better on Facebook than they do, even though they're so much bigger than us. Same thing holds true for Twitter. They're 11 times bigger than us on Twitter from a followers perspective, but we're 12 times more engaging than them in terms of how engaging our audience is. And it's a similar story, not quite as strong on Instagram, but a similar story. And really about that engagement, I wanted to kind of run through sort of a timeline on how people have posted content to social platforms. So if you see before 2012, I'm using BuzzFeed as an example because I think they've done a great job. These four photos of puppies. How cute are they? And it says, "Growing up sucks." And how can you not like that? How can you not share that with your friend back in 2012? And really, when you were posting to social back then, it was inline, it was low effort, low integration. It was really native. Then, as I mentioned, this 2-year period, 2013 to 2014, where everyone's like, okay, I have a lot of engagement on these social platforms. I need to start deriving value from this. I need to start getting traffic back to my site where I control the ads, and I control the revenue. And so you started seeing a lot of lists and rankings. You started seeing a lot of teasing of content saying, here's the top 10 of this, but you have to click back to actually have the payoff. And so good content became something called like a soft sell, where you were still getting people to link back to your content, but you weren't doing it in a clickbait kind of way. And bad content became sort of clickbait. And we saw a lot of publishers who sort of popped up during this period just on this model. But users got tired of it. It was a bad user experience. I think Facebook and Twitter got tired of it, and so they started sort of downplaying publishers that did this. And then start of this year, we really started seeing an explosion of content being ingested and promoted inline. So you're seeing Facebook, you're all familiar with the instant articles that Facebook's doing. They are heavily promoting inline video. Same thing with Twitter. It's really about creating the best user experience. And so us as publishers, we have a dilemma, right? Do we put up all of our content, and then how do we monetize it, right? And if we put all our content on there, are we empowering them to take advantage of publishers and not cut us in on the pie? Now, as it's been mentioned earlier, instant articles and inline video on Facebook, both of those models, Facebook is coming out with a rev share with publishers, and I think it's going to be successful, but I think that's really the dilemma for folks in this room and sort of any publisher worldwide. So, and I'll sort of come back to that point as well. I think one of the things, and this definitely speaks to Anderson's presentation a second ago, 85% of smartphone usage are in apps. So that means 15% on mobile web. Of that 85%, 84% is just on 5 apps. So there is a tremendous struggle and fight to have your app or your content be seen because people are really only using 5 apps. And the top 4 apps in terms of minutes are Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. And it's not a coincidence that all these are social apps. So when you're thinking as a publisher, when you have that dilemma, do I put all of my content on there, do I not? I say, I don't think you have an option, right? So if you hold back and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that, the 4 people at your table probably will, and you'll be left behind. I think social platforms and all these platforms in general, I wouldn't see them as platforms. I would see them as media companies, right? So they aren't, and we're competing with them on a day in and day out basis for eyeball attention, right? So every person only has a certain number of minutes and hours they're prepared to spend on their phone, and if they're on their platform, they're not on your site. So it's both a partnership, but you're also competing with them. So when we see these social platforms, we really see them as media companies. They're not creating their own original content like all of us are, but they're syndicating our content. In a lot of cases, they're not necessarily paying for it, and so how can we get into an arrangement with them that we are sharing on that upside for having all of our content be on those platforms? I would say the other thing that we see with Bleacher Report, we see ourselves as both a publisher. We create about 200 pieces of content a day, and also a platform. I talked about our TeamStream app. That TeamStream app sends content to publishers like yourself. It sends it to Bleacher Report. So we really have 2 parts of our business. So we're playing in both sandpits, and that's really important for our long-term business. So as I talked about before, the amount of time people are spending these social apps. So this is for males 18 to 24. So in Facebook, you're seeing a male who's 18 to 24 spend 1,000 minutes in that app. In social apps, you're seeing Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, also really high minutes. That next line there are sort of over-the-top apps, Netflix, YouTube, Spotify. And then that next line is kind of where Bleacher Report sits and the TeamStream app sits. And you can see it starts behaving a little bit more like a social platform than it does a sports app. Sports app are in that 80 to 200 minutes per month, and we're about 350. So when we saw the stat, we were really excited about it, and it just it just made us feel good that we were kind of behaving more like a social app. So when we I think one of the great things about being in the digital space is that there's so many opportunities. You can partner with so many different places. You can create so many different projects. I think it's also one of the hard things. There's so much chance for distraction, right? So you have to pick and choose because you have a limited amount of time and you don't have a lot of resources all the time. So you have to pick the platforms that you think are going to be successful. So as I've talked about before, Facebook and Twitter started as a brand building exercise for us for those first 3 years. When we look at any digital opportunity, we look at it through a lens of, is this going to drive revenue? Is it going to drive brand? Or is it going to drive audience? So those are the 3 things. And if something is all 3, like we obviously do it. Even if something is just 2 out of the 3, we do it. And then if something is just 1 out of the 3, we're like, maybe we'll pass, we'll think about it. With social platforms, because the monetization hasn't been there, we really look at it slightly different. It's brand, it's traffic, but then with this experiment bucket. And this is really where you have to hedge, and you have to make sure that if something explodes, you already have an audience there that you've been building. So for us, in 2013, we started experimenting with Instagram, and now it's moved from that experimental bucket into brand building. And you can see same thing happen with Snapchat and Vine, and then Yo and Kick and those others have never kind of moved out of the experimental category, but we're always looking at different options there. So I talked about that period from 2013 to the end of 2014, where Facebook kind of tweaked the algorithm, right? So they made, I think if you were kind of paying attention to your own personal feed, you probably saw a lot more publisher content in there. Starting in about January of this year, they kind of shifted back, and you probably started seeing more of your friends' content in there. I think if during that period when we were getting crazy amounts of traffic, if we had doubled down and said, this is never going to end, we're just going to put a lot of resources into this, I think we would have been mistaken. And because it's really, and the same thing with Google. They have an algorithm, they control it. It's really about, I would equate the analogy to stock market. You wouldn't put all of your investments, all of your time in one sector, in one company. You have to think of these different platforms as opportunities, but they can't be central to your business. You have to have your owned and operated, your site, your app, the things you control 100%. So at Bleacher Report, when we're evaluating this, when we're looking at our budget, on our revenue, all these things are incremental. We don't count on revenue and traffic from these social platforms. For us, social platforms, it's the main thing we look at it is for brand building. Then we get traffic and monetization. It feels like it's coming, but it's clearly not there yet. So a lot has been talked about newspapers, TV. I think if you kind of went back in time, it wouldn't be crazy to kind of hear, you'll never monetize digital, newspapers are here to stay, or TV isn't going anywhere. I think if you think about those quotes, you could say the same thing about websites and anything that I think is not an app. So I saw this quote the other day. It said, the social platform revolution is to the web what the web was to what came before it. So when you think about how much the web disrupted magazines and newspapers, and you think about how much digital disrupted the music industry, we think that it's not unlikely that in 3 to 5 years, you're not going to have people sharing links or knowing what a domain is. People will still have their websites, but I had an interesting story. So I have 2 daughters, 4 and 8, and we were watching a Disney movie, and it's a long story, but we were watching it on a VHS tape, and it was making that because I was rewinding it, and my daughter said, what's that sound? Is something wrong with the machine? I'm like, no, it's rewinding. And she's like, what's rewinding? Like, what? And I was like, it just took me back. Like, my children have lived in a world where they're either watching movies on Netflix, on some over-the-top property, or on a DVD. And even DVDs are becoming like old to them, and probably old to all of us. And so that was really like, I was like, whoa. And so I think the idea, and this was also mentioned in Anderson's presentation, that group of 11 to 15-year-old people are not going to have email. They're just not. And in 3 to 5 years, people and businesses and publishers may have websites, but we believe all that consumption is going to take place on native platforms. Let me go back. So I'm going to show you a piece of content. At the very beginning, I said that it's not just about the business model. It's not just about putting content on these social platforms. It's really important that you're putting social content on social platforms. If you're putting all of your content on social, you're creating a lot of noise. I think you all realize the way Facebook works. You do a post, it shows it to a small set of people. If it does well there, it opens it up to a bigger group of people. You are hurting yourself if you post content on social media that isn't social. So when we only post stuff on social that we decided was going to be on social before we created it. And that could be a video, that could be a text piece, but we designate, of our 200 pieces of content we create every day, about 30 of those we designate, this is going on social. And we may have some long-form video or long-form special text project that we put on social as well, but for the most part, we really focus on creating content for social. So I'm going to show you a quick 2-minute video that was created with social in mind. What we did was we went to the NBA Draft Combine. So not sure how many sport fans are in here, but basically all the people coming out of college, there was this combine, and all the media sort of were asking them questions like, what team do you think is going to draft you? What are the things you need to work on in your first year of the NBA? All these sort of very sort of generic questions that everyone was asking, and we decided we had a certain amount of time with them. We decided we were going to ask them different things, and we were going to try and create content that was very social, but also set us apart from what everyone else was doing. So we asked them to do a dramatic reading of their favorite Drake lyrics. And so this is what you're going to see. And when we created it, it wasn't just about putting this on our site and just putting it everywhere. we truly believe in that content everywhere experience, but you have to create the content with that in mind. So when we were creating this content, we're like, what's the experience gonna be like on Snapchat? What's it gonna be like on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? And we really had, the producers who were creating the content had all those sort of questions in the back of their mind. So without further ado, I'm gonna play this video.
10 bands, 50 bands, 100 bands. Let's just not even discuss it, man. I'm way up. I feel blessed. I'm so proud of you.
Running through the 6 with my woes.
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now the whole team's here.
Now she want a photo. You already know though. You only live once. YOLO.
I had somebody tell me I fell off. Ooh, I bet you needed that.
Every day, sitting on the bench, we don't really play. She calls me the referee because I'm so official. My ex asked me, where you moving? I said, on to better things.
Don't Michael Jordan still has his hoop earring in?
I get boxes of free Jordans. Like I play for North Carolina. I like all my S's with 2 lines through them. What am I doing? What am I doing? Oh yeah, that's right. I'm doing me.
I live for this. It's not just a hobby like that. Now she want a photo.
You already know though.
You only live once.
It's a motto. YOLO.
So I'll be the first to admit that it's sort of a kind of a strange video. I've watched it a bunch of times. Every time I watch it, it gets a little bit better. But I'm also not I'm not the key demo, right? So this is trying to appeal to 16 to 24-year-old sports fans, and it did. For that group of people, it exploded. And so this is just some examples of how on these different platforms we uploaded that video. So without further ado, open it up to questions. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a couple of them. You're talking about how we believe 5 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, the world is going to be almost entirely social. And you're saying it's basically brand building right now, and that brand building leads it, and then monetization happens. What about direct traffic? So direct traffic is what you are monetizing best at this point, I assume. What level of direct traffic do you have? What's happening with that? And what kind of monetization is most successful with that direct traffic?
Yeah, so when we say direct traffic, it's people coming to bleacherreport.com or visiting our app.
Yeah.
So that's our owned and operated stuff. For us, direct traffic is around 50 to 60% of our total traffic. So obviously our sale, when we talk about content everywhere and getting everyone in the organization comfortable with it, the biggest part was getting our sales team comfortable with it, right? And we had to tell them, we're gonna build this audience there. There isn't revenue there yet, but they will be, trust us. And that's true of everything we've built. You have to build it, They will come, and then you figure out how to monetize it. And you have to have enough things in the pipeline so that you have some mature parts of your business, our newsletter program, our Team Stream app, our Bleacher Report site. Those are mature parts of our business, but then we're always in the pipeline. We have these things that we are putting bets on, and pretty big bets on, and hoping that, that they pay off.
And how big a bet are you making on Apple with the announcements coming today? Have you been working on, you think this is a major game changer from 1 to 10? Where would you put what you think is coming today?
Apple News?
Apple announcements, the ad blocking, iOS 9 overall.
Yeah, no, I think we are in discussions with Apple around Apple News, so we plan on being part of that. To what degree, we need to decide, because you give them all your content, or you can give them some of your content. So we're in the process of deciding that. I think ad blocking is a fascinating topic that we could probably spend 2 hours talking about. You're seeing some publishers putting it in a block to block ad blocking, saying, basically creating a paywall, right? And saying, if you want to see the content, you have to allow ads. So we don't think that's the right approach. Just read an interesting thing where it's going to be, these people who are creating ad blockers and publishers like ourselves. It's going to be a cat and mouse game for a while. We believe in user experience, so we rather lose out some percentage of people who are ad blocking than do something drastic that's non-user friendly. So that's the way we view it, but it's a problem.
So you're deciding how much content you might put on Apple News.
Exactly.
What's your best guess? If when you get onto it, 5, 50, how you were saying, basically put a lot of content up, see what happens. Get a sense of what you might do?
Yeah, I think we always take it slow. We put our feet in the water, see what the temperature's like, see how well it monetizes, see what the revenue looks like. But we've never been afraid to cannibalize ourselves. So when I talk about newsletters, if we were afraid to cannibalize ourselves, we wouldn't have created TeamStream, because a lot of people stopped using newsletters and went to TeamStream. And if we were afraid to cannibalize ourselves, we wouldn't have started putting our content on social, because we would said, like, well, people are going to move from our app to social. So I think the key thing is not to see these platforms as cannibalization. It's opportunity to grow your brand. It's an opportunity to reach people you wouldn't have otherwise. Like, if you decide I'm not putting my content there, they're not coming to your site anyway. Like, you've just lost an opportunity to show your content to these people. I think the tricky part is, and this is not just with Apple, this is with Facebook as well. Like, if you empower them so much by giving all your content, like right now the terms are great, right? So it's like, it's probably going to be something like you keep all direct revenue and we split on some other things. But as that gets bigger, like, they'll change the terms. And it's kind of that bait and switch thing. But I think ultimately you can't be afraid of cannibalizing yourself. You have to kind of push forward.
So you use the word, I hate to use the word cannibalization as we're getting closer to lunch here, but we're all worried about cannibalization. You make a good point about it. Are there things you have done over the years with all the testing where you have seen cannibalization and pulled back? Or have you not really seen it yet?
I think every product we've always created, we've felt like the next product is a better version of the previous one. So we were in many ways hoping to cannibalize the previous product. And some people are, our newsletter product is, people typically 55 and older, so we're fine if those people are moving mobile. That's fine with us. So we encourage cannibalization is probably the...
So you can't think of anything that you've done where you said, oh, we maybe went a little too far, let's pull back. It's interesting.
Not as such. I think we're at 80% mobile now. We think by next year it'll be 90%. I think the key thing for us was getting our sales team on board and trying to sell mobile before other people were. Right now with our sales packages, like, you have to buy mobile. We don't allow advertisers to say you can only buy desktop. It's a Bleacher Report universe experience, and at some point, that Bleacher Report universe package will include these platforms as well. Yeah.
Good luck. Sales culture is always slower than tech culture.
It is. They always trail us by about a year to a year and a half, but we know that, so we prepare for that.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.